Hey, everybody, and welcome to Notes from the Other Side. This is a podcast for people who love Jesus but have some real concerns about Christianity. Here at Notes, we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people using a progressive theological lens and a socio-historical approach to studying the Bible. So if that sounds like your jam, come on in and have a seat. But buckle up, it might get bumpy.
The Burros of Berea is a conversational podcast that delves into biblical studies featuring hosts from diverse faith backgrounds, including some without any religious affiliation. The podcast emphasizes open dialogue, allowing hosts to share personal beliefs, opinions, and speculations about biblical texts. Listeners are invited to join these discussions, fostering a community of shared exploration. Notes from the Other Side is a podcast tailored for individuals who love Jesus but harbor concerns about traditional Christianity. The show adopts a progressive theological lens and a socio-historical approach to the Bible, often pushing theological boundaries. Listeners are cautioned that the content may not be safe for work or church settings, reflecting the podcast's commitment to candid and potentially provocative discussions. Both podcasts are associated with Tiziana Verse, who hosts deep dive studies into intriguing biblical topics and figures. She is joined by co-hosts Andy Bishop and Rick Welch, offering a modern perspective on historical, archaeological, and cultural aspects of the Bible. The collaboration provides listeners with a comprehensive understanding of biblical narratives enriched by diverse viewpoints.
I love
it wrote
that.
in 2 seconds. ChatGPT.
Tell me
about Tiziana Verse and the Burros of Berea. Done.
Are you freaking kidding me? ChatGPT just
4.0
did that?
in literally 20 seconds.
Oh my God, but that was so good. I was like, what did you get that from? Where did you get that from?
Did that for me.
Oh my. So like while we were sitting here talking, you were just put that in. So now that's why?
It is terrifying, especially whenever the dogs of war come in and they just follow commands and they can run at 85 miles an hour and they can shoot my family. That's terrifying. But as far as the use for research and the ability to do podcasts,
you know what that does
amazing.
too, though? Like, for example, for somebody like me, one of the things that stands out about me when I'm like trying to get a job is my ability to write. But ChatGPT is robbing that from me because any moron with like the ability to cut and paste
it's a huge
can
problem
put together.
It's also like affecting people's ability to access their own memory, that everything is digitized and you're not coming up with your own independent thought.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you're depending on a machine to
But
store for you.
I love that.
And we
use so much.
We used to do it with other people and say, remember that time? Instead, we're letting a machine do it.
Yeah.
And the machines will come for you.
I've seen Terminator. I've seen it.
Does anybody know who wrote it?
Who wrote Terminator? Oh my gosh.
It wasn't James Cameron Ray. That's just a director.
He's a director, but no. Because that was my first thought. I was like, wait a second.
The same
Keith Green.
the same African-American woman who wrote The Matrix. And both of them were stole from her.
Who?
They just recently.
Wait, I thought the Wachowski brothers or whatever.
They
Nice try.
didn't write it.
They stole it. And it has now been proven. And the woman has been given money.
Oh.
She's brilliant. And by the way, Terminator is a prequel to The Matrix.
Who is it?
I'll tell you right now. I can't remember
Oh my
her name.
gosh, Terminator is a prequel to The Matrix.
See?
Oh my gosh, Terminator is a prequel to The Matrix.
But the problem is that
I did not put that together until this precise moment in history.
It makes sense.
It makes
That
all
makes
the
sense.
sense.
she's brilliant, guys.
And it obviously came from the same mind.
Sophia Stewart.
Okay.
And it's called, it was a screenplay treatment called The Third Eye in 1983. But originally her claims were rejected by courts, but as little as 2 years ago. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I need to go check that out. You can text that to me.
African-American woman who was completely taken advantage of by Hollywood.
Of course.
That's not surprising, but also,
Wow.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Notes from the Other Side. We're going to take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people. I'm your host, Tiziana Mom So Hard Verse, and I've got some really cool individuals in the studio with me today. To my right, absolutely 100%, Rick the Podfather Welch.
How you momming so hard today?
I'm not vomiting.
Oh, that's good.
I need to put that in the plus column.
I am now on a GLP-1, and it's making me nauseous constantly.
What's a GLP-1?
Tirzepatide. It's a diet drug.
Oh, God, can I have some?
Yes, and I think it might shoot DNA into me, which will screw up my autoimmune system. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I helped the woman across the street from me takes care of her mom who's in her 80s and can't walk anymore. So I go over there every morning and help her get up. And there was a whole gastrointestinal issue the other day on Monday. And I went over there and helped her get her up. But then when I went back, because I helped her get up out of bed, help her get back into bed, I like went in full PPE, brother. I mean, I had like one of those like straight up masks and like
Michael
gloves
Keaton
and stuff.
Mr. Mom.
Oh, I was not messing around. And I still woke up Tuesday and I was like, ooh, I don't feel quite so good. And then like at the gym, like vomited all my coffee and went, uh-oh. So I stayed home yesterday and kept all the kids home yesterday just to be on the safe side. And as of this morning, everybody is
knock, knock, knock.
symptom free. I know I showed up at preschool drop off and her teacher was like, God bless you.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you for keeping those kids home just to make sure. And I was like, yeah, trust me. I was in the bed all day on Tuesday.
So that's how you mom so hard today.
That's how I mom so hard. Yeah, that's how that's how I mom so hard. Yeah. Behind the glass, we have missed Andy the last episode or two. So Rocket Man Andy Bishop. Woo.
I don't leave.
Yeah,
I just bought
Andy
a car.
lives here.
I don't leave.
This is a super killer car too.
I know. I saw it out front.
I know.
It is fancy.
A longtime customer. It's a Honda Civic 2020 hatch. They're giving it more credit than
It's
it's
a
due.
chick magnet,
But
especially in Hendersonville.
Silver bullet.
a long time rap customer whom I love dearly. His name's Domino, actually. He's like this sweet. He's a very sweet guy. He just like offhandedly was like, that's nice. And then later was like, you don't really go anywhere though. And I was like, God damn it. Oh, sorry, wrong podcast. But my response was that because he called me cold and correct.
Yeah. You don't even go anywhere,
Wouldn't
brother.
that be funny?
You walk
though,
to the backyard for work every day.
just because Andy
Pants
said
are
that,
optional, frankly.
that God did damn his car.
Yeah.
Would that be terrible?
No.
I hope not.
Get the old car. Miss and hit the old car.
The old piece of crap.
Those thunderbolts are so unpredictable, you know? You think you've got a hair trigger and an aim, you know? God needs to get his scope realigned is what I think is going on. Yeah. Well, folks, we've got another special guest that I'm going to intro here in just a second. But for those of you that have been listening, Rick and I did an episode recently. If you haven't been listening, once again, get out of here. Go listen to the last episode because you're going to have no idea what we're talking about. But Rick and I sat down in the studio to chat recently about one of our favorite Christian music artists, Keith Green, and the ministry that was developed both before his death in 1982 and that continued on after it, Last Days Ministry. What started out as a fun and lighthearted episode around a Christian music recording artist that Rick and I loved took a really dark turn as we started to dive more into Last Days Ministries and what we would call some of the cult adjacent behavior related to that particular church. We'd listen to some podcasts about and some individuals that came out of that ministry talking about like sort of the thought control, the behavior control, some of the aspects of what was involved. And to me, I sort of had like a real moment in my own life because it was so similar to the giant megachurch that I grew up in that I would like to continue talking about this. I would like to continue having a conversation about very visible Christian ministries that have a lot of money, a lot of influence, and a lot of power. And I would like to talk about how even some of the smaller homespun churches that we love so well are feeding grounds for these larger ministries because some of the same toxic ideologies around religion abound in both places. So to that end, I would like to invite our special guest, Heather.
Hello.
Thanks.
Did you catch all that, Heather?
I think so.
Listen, if you're around Keezy, you learn really quick. Like she's very capable. You got to stay in there. And when you listen to this podcast, you know how people will do like 1.5 times, 2.5 times? We've been begging for a halftime. Do they have one?
Halftime.
We need a half speed. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm trying to fit a lot into like a short sentence.
Of course you are.
Because, what I did is I just told everybody to stop listening and go listen to the previous episode and then gave you a quick 30-second recap of that episode because I know you're not going to do that. You're going to keep driving and listening to this one. So that's what we're doing now. We're going to have a chit chat. In 2024, there was a book that came out. It was wildly popular. It was written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist that had embedded herself for 4 years in a large ministry in Philadelphia called Circle of Hope. The book of the same name came out after her years of study. She did her best to remain a sort of journalistic observer in this large ministry that had, a church in Philadelphia, but then also I think 3 or 4 churches elsewhere. But the church eventually witnessed its demise, I believe, from the inside out. And she sort of paints this sympathetic picture of a group of people just doing their best to get back to first century Christianity, which is something we noted was exactly at the heartbeat of Last Days ministry for Keith Green. And though that ministry had that at its core, this desire to get back to this loving community, it still kind of sort of hit the bricks and burst up into flames. So rather than talk to a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who wrote the story, I thought it would behoove us to have this conversation with a person who actually was a member of that church. So this would be my friend Heather, who was a part of Circle of Hope ministry from when to when?
That's a little bit hard to say. I roughly, let's say 3 to 2012, 13.
Yeah. That's a long time. That's a long time. And this journalist became a part of it says that she asked for, I don't know how that works. As a journalist, she basically asked the church, can I be embedded in your congregation as an observer and take notes in 2019?
Oh, she asked that ahead of time.
She asked it, and they were like, bet, sounds good. So they knew that she was like in there secretly observing and taking notes. So she must have appeared very shortly after
I don't think it was very secret. I think it was, she was very open about it.
Yeah.
And her other writing was super popular. And I think people in the church were excited for her to be there. And some people. And some other people probably were a little skeptical about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you didn't start your experience with Christianity in 2003, though. So let's start back from the beginning, because I was asking you this earlier on the way up. You know, one of the questions that we often will begin a testimony episode with on the Bros of Berea podcast is, you know, what's your earliest recollection of the name Jesus? And when I asked you that question, you were like, I couldn't even possibly.
No, I could not possibly remember.
Yeah. So tell me about the church you grew up in that case.
Sure. So I grew up, we're in the South. I grew up around Charlotte. So my parents were both believers. We were, when we were small, we went to a little non-denominational, kind of Presbyterian-ish church that was very much like a 70s Jesus movement group of people,
crunchy.
Coming from that. Not super crunchy, but I feel like it was more like the Gaithers and that kind of thing that were really guiding these young people, because my parents were in their 20s when they got married. So we were in that church for a long time. And then about the time that I started middle school, we started going to a mega church in Charlotte, reasonably kind of middle of the road conservative, but very privileged. A lot of wealth there and a lot of production and a lot of expectations for purity in your relationships. The usual mega church vibes.
Yeah. Well, so what was the denomination? Was that non-denominational too?
I think it switched around a little bit. It was one of these churches where there's kind of a charismatic speaker and everything is kind of centered around that person. And so we switched a couple of times. I think it was an evangelical Presbyterian church at one point. I think it changed to something else, but definitely the pastor was the pastor.
Well, one thing I think that's fascinating that we don't necessarily recognize when we talk about denominations is that denominations is not just a style of worship, it's a style of government. So when you have a Baptist tradition, for example, every person who is a card-holding member of that church has voting power. So when there's going to be a decision made about the pastor's salary, the church in general, they have a meeting. And I was now you're Baptist, Rick, correct?
Yeah.
So they have these meetings, quarterly meetings, and you go to those meetings and they present the topics or whatever, and people yay or nay that stuff.
That's correct.
That is a Baptist church. Presbyterian churches have a slightly different government.
Yes.
They have the presbytery, which is a group of elders and leaders that have been selected from the congregation that are meant to basically represent the thoughts, needs, and feelings of the congregation. And the presbytery and the pastor work together to decide what's best for the church. But in Assemblies of God, That pastor is the head. That's it. And you don't question that pastor or their authority, period.
Right.
And the pastor is the person who appoints all other pastors and appoints all other deacons and appoints all other positions of leadership. They come from the pastor.
When did baptism or Baptists originate? When did that split? Do we know?
Yeah, they were a split off of the Anglican Church. This was after the Restorationist movements, usually around like more like mid 1700s when the Baptists really, apart from the Anabaptists, but the Baptists like you're talking about, like mine, it was in the like mid 1700s, late 1600s to mid 1700s.
So a little earlier than I thought.
And it was it was just about baptism was for adults. It wasn't about children. Like
that was the big beef that the Anabaptists had, was that like you shouldn't be baptizing children. You should baptize only adults because baptism should come out of a personal choice and decision rather than we're going to quickly baptize this infant lest it die of some sort of something or other and then we have to make an explanation for who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. We don't want to do that.
They have a huge impact. If you study the early part of America, all right,
the Anabaptists played a big part.
There was a big role,
yes.
a big role in this country.
But the Baptist tradition is slightly different from the Anabaptists.
Right. They were being persecuted because of this view of adult baptism versus pedobaptism. Yeah. It's pretty wild, man.
It's crazy.
People will persecute you over literally anything.
And you know what? Straight up murder your ass. I'm not even talking about just, run-of-the-mill persecution. Like, you gonna get dead.
Yeah, dude, we don't understand. Like in America, we don't get persecuted. Like,
no.
You know, an atheist coming up and saying, I don't believe it. That's not persecution. These people endured, like, their families being burned alive.
And it's awful.
Yeah, that's crazy. Over like, baptizing adults. That's so wild.
I will tell you, this is how they killed the Baptists. They drowned them.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
You did,
the minute you said this is how they killed the Baptists, I was like, they must drown
like,
them,
so you want to go
ironic.
underwater? You want to go underwater?
Yeah.
And so they did. And that is, look it up. Google it.
Absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. But in any case, back to you, Heather. So I find it fascinating.
Speaking of drowning in things.
So you started off in a smaller, kind of country church, non-denominational country church, moved over to this big giant mega church. It was flashy. Mm-hmm. It was exciting. It had a charismatic preacher that at some point during its history went from an Episcopal style leadership role, like there was Presbyterian style leadership role, which obviously would have included some sort of checks and balances, over to this kind of the more Assemblies of God style where like the pastor's really in charge. That's the anointed one. And that's the end of that.
Yeah, I think that is what happened in that megachurch. I don't know that even everyone in the church knew that was what was happening, but he was definitely unable to relinquish power, really. Yeah. I mean, he wanted total control over how the church was run. And it was a massive church with a massive amount of money. So that, resources were really kind of pointed in the direction that he wanted them pointed in at all times. Anyway.
What was the theology? So what were the basic tenets about God and religion and the world that you remember walking away from that with?
I mean, I think that I was taught most of the mainstream evangelical ideals that people immediately think of, that we did missionary work overseas. We worked in inner cities. We believed in the inerrancy of Scripture. We were generally conservative politically.
Jesus Christ is the Son of God sent to rescue man from heaven and hell. And if you're not preaching the gospel of Christ, people are going to hell and it's your fault.
Yes. They're very, you should be like reaching your friends for Christ. Yes. Yeah. All of it. And I didn't feel like put down in that environment. I think that was just, it was an assumption from the get-go. I never remember learning any of those things. That was my culture from birth, really. Yeah. I went to a Christian college, same small Presbyterian, local. And the same kind of expectations, I think. Mm-hmm. The same kind of eschatology. Mm-hmm. I didn't do great there. But I did graduate. And in the middle, in between kind of failing some classes and flailing around a bit, I went to YWAM in San Francisco, had a different experience with that group, which is much more Pentecostal than anything I had ever been.
So YWAM is Youth with a Mission. And YWAM is an organization that we also talked about during the last episode that got really wrapped up in and around Keith Green's ministry because YWAM, and Rick, you'll find this fascinating. It was your friend was working where now?
The Lord's Land?
Yeah, but what was the area of California?
I think that they had property in San Francisco at
Rick
the same
said
time.
a word, and I can't remember the word, and you said the same word about this particular district at this particular time.
Like Redwood Valley?
No. There was a guy, listen everybody, just fast forward, press 15 seconds ahead if you, this is like, this is a rabbit trail I'm going to chase. Your friend worked in a certain district witnessing to like prostitutes and stuff at the same time.
Haight-Ashbury? Is
Haight
that what you're talking about?
Ashbury.
Oh, that was about Manson.
Yeah, that's what you were
Haight-Ashbury.
talking about because there might be like an interesting, there's an interesting correlation between, Rick was saying that, to come to find out, there was
The Jolly West Clinic.
had a CIA plant as the head of that clinic and was doing,
that is crazy.
It's
and
not
it's really
conspiracy
interesting. Well,
theory.
her
It is
friend
true.
actually worked in Haight-Ashbury at the same time as
I
as part
believe
of
that
another
one.
ministry. But so in the middle of this, you decided to go be a part of YWAM and get college credits. How much did that cost you?
I feel like it was about the same as a semester at college would cost.
So you
which
paid
is
money.
significant because I was at a private Christian school. So I don't remember. It was probably 1997.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
But still, that's all part of this whole. That's all part of this whole thing. You're in Bible college. You're having some trouble with some of the classes. You're doing well. You decide to take a break. What attracted you to YWAM?
I think we talked about this. It was very different ideologically from the way that I was raised, as far as like Azusa Pacific and all these things that were happening on the West Coast were very Pentecostal.
Yes.
Really. And that was not my personal background. Everything was very I don't know how to say it. Normal.
Yeah.
Relaxed and conservative.
Yeah, conservative.
There was nobody like screaming and crying and running up and down the streets at your church services. There was nobody speaking in tongues. There was
never.
But there's also if you never grew up that way and that wasn't considered normal, can be something very attractive about the Pentecostal movement because it also sort of purports a quote unquote more real experience.
Yes.
Because all your feelings are allowed, all your experiences are allowed.
Yes.
You can cry, you can wail, you can have whatever emotional experience you're having, and like that's okay.
Yes.
So there's a certain aspect of Pentecostal Christianity that if you grew up evangelical but in a more conservative, buttoned down white gloves version of it, is very attractive and freeing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fastest growing church in America with 600 million plus actually in the globe. And it is one of those churches that like to point back again to the early church in Acts chapter 2.
That's right. That's right.
People see it and they're like, oh, I think that's the closest. And that makes sense. That's
For me, I grew up, my mother was a social worker kind of counselor growing up. I always had like a real desire to work with people that were in crisis.
Yeah.
So YWAM was working with homeless people and sex workers in San Francisco. And then we went overseas and we're working with little children in Thailand and went to Vietnam, blah, blah, blah.
So it satisfied that desire to feel like you're doing something valuable, not just with like your spiritual walk, but like you're helping people with your hands.
Yes. And
You're
I was
doing
20
something
years
with
old.
people.
So it was like the safe way to do that.
But do you feel like you were doing something valuable?
Some.
Because it sounds like all those things that you're trying to do to help these people were pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like as good a try as you're apt to have.
I think it was a good try for a 20-year-old. I don't know how productive it is for a 20-year-old suburban Southern person in San Francisco to be like handing out coffee to teenage male sex workers in the Tenderloin.
Right.
Right.
I don't know.
At least they got a cup of coffee.
at least
But
they got a
yeah,
cup of coffee.
but not-
Some of it
yeah.
is condescending. Some of it is
Yeah.
not actually helpful.
Yeah. It's one of
right?
those things that on paper, right? On paper, it sounds really
Sounds great.
good.
It's a
But
lot
in
of those
practice, if you're asking people from two very different sociological backgrounds and two very different stratas of American society to try and meet together and I read something very interesting the other day about compassion. And it was talking about how compassion often feels like this emotional response to suffering, but that requires us to look down on something.
Yes.
And that if your compassion is predicated on pity, then it's not compassion. It's just self-grandizement. And I was
Yes.
like, ooh.
I mean, what is the purpose of the cup of coffee, actually? I'm really curious. Like, what is
Well-
the purpose?
Because sometimes it's nice to have a cup of coffee. I think that's the only purpose.
I think
Is that
that's
it?
Yeah, I
the only
think
reason
Did it
can-
who
feel
was it that
condescending?
said that the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco? It's like a miserable place to be like working on the street.
Yeah.
I feel like so that was part of it, but it's like to have conversations.
So the idea is to use the coffee as a lure to try and sell
To
somebody
win souls
something
for the
else.
Lord.
See, and that's and I think that's
I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where you're like, is it manipulative only if you don't declare the purpose? Right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to sneak the second part in, then it's manipulative. If you're like, if you say it all out loud, then that's a contract.
people are making
Yes.
a choice.
That's
yeah.
absolutely fine.
Yeah, makes sense.
But also, I kind of believe not quite the same, but similarly about our own like emotional motivations for doing good.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter why you did the good thing.
Yeah.
So long as
I
the
don't
good thing
give a
got
shit.
did. Yeah, yeah.
As
It
long as
doesn't
it got
matter,
Yeah.
but I think
Well, you're about
This
to
is
quibble.
maybe a
You're
separate-
about to quibble about what is and isn't good. I'm not doing that. I'm making a huge statement.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
big,
No.
overarching statement.
I just think that as church people, sometimes we don't ask the person we're helping what they actually need.
Yeah, we're not asking you how
I've
can I
decided
actually
for
support you.
that what you need is a cup of coffee and Jesus, and
Yeah.
what you might actually need is a hotel room.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. Hotel room probably help a lot.
Or
Yeah.
a condom.
Or a condom.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Honestly, or a condom. I mean, and that I wish I would have take that soundbite and tattoo it on my fucking forehead.
I
What
need a
we
condom?
decide as Christians. No, no.
Not that part?
No, I'll tattoo that somewhere else.
Good Lord.
No, we, instead of asking people what they need, we as Christians decide that what they need is a cup of coffee and Jesus. True ministry, if you are walking around with an idea that you have inside of you, a connection to the divine, unending, everlasting, and that your job is to disseminate that love and energy, but you decide that what that means is you are offering X, Y, and Z, or at least you've been told that that's what that means. I think that's a real fundamental problem in Christianity as a general rule. I'm listening to a really good book by April A. Joy called Star Spangled Jesus. And it's a book about her journey in fundamentalist Christianity. And the book is about Christian nationalism and the rise of Christian nationalism and this conflation of Christianity with Republican values specifically on a political level. And she talks about the pressure to constantly, always, and only Jesus, 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 Jesus at all times. And it's a very real pressure when you grew up like Heather and I did, because your story is so very similar to mine. You know, I stopped at the mega church. You made a hard left.
I made a hard left.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear it.
But you know what? But
Yeah.
I was obsessed with YWAM. And
Right.
I wanted to go to CFNI. That was my whole goal when I graduated
Yeah.
from high school, was go to CFNI, Christ for the Nations Institute in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
so I could be a missionary. I would have done YWAM if I'd had any money. I didn't have any money. I wanted to go to YWAM.
Right.
But yeah, but that's the other thing about that particular ministry. You know, you can apply for a
it's pay to
scholarship,
play.
but it's pay to play. Tell me a little bit more about that, you know?
So I think a bit, I was 20,
Yeah.
so what do I know about anything? But I feel I was a bit disillusioned.
Yeah.
I maybe I was rebellious, whatever, but I did not quite like fit the mold for what they were after at YWAM. I was not asked to like stay on after my time there. I've always been like a little bit of a troublemaker or whatever. And but I also found when I was there, I had always from kindergarten, they asked us to draw a picture. What do you want to be when you grow up? Missionary. Drew myself in the jungle, whatever. And I spent this time doing the outreach that you do at YWAM, and I thought, this is BS. Like a lot of these children in these communities have a better handle on how to live together and be supportive than our culture has.
Yeah.
On how to support people in crisis. So if there's a need, I stay in our country. And I wasn't like done with being a Christian, but I was done with like, I don't need to leave to go to Vietnam and tell those people how to be a Christian. They can figure it out.
Yeah.
They are not less than we are.
Right.
Whatever. So I came back and finished college. Great. I got my degree. It was difficult. I'm a terrible student. I got my degree in Bible and cross-cultural studies. I got a job doing social work, working with children and on probation in a group home setting. Did a little runaway shelter work. And then that was really hard. And I got pretty burned out pretty fast. I was working. I mean, there were times that I was working 18-hour shifts with kids because
in crisis.
In crisis.
In very real
because
crisis.
I was young and not married and I could do it.
Yeah.
I was going to make all the money and like do all the hours.
So this was by choice, not forced?
This was by choice.
Okay.
I was working for a nonprofit.
Sure.
And
Did they pay you overtime? I'm sorry, I'm just curious.
I did get overtime.
Okay, good. I just wanted to know.
They didn't know. I was working at two different arms of the same nonprofit at the same time, and I don't think they actually knew that I was working like overlapping 8-hour shifts.
You're just trying to make a living.
Trying to make a living and trying to like occupy myself because I think I had a lot of energy I cared about the kids we were working with a lot, and I
Yeah, but compassion fatigue is real.
Yeah, that'll burn you out.
It is.
Love.
So
It'll burn you right out.
I got a call while I was doing that job from a friend who said he was starting an intentional community in Michigan, and did I want to come and check it out? This is a friend that I met in college at a homeless rights protest. I was very passionate about in Philadelphia. So he was involved with Circle of Hope Church. He was involved with some other people that are involved with Circle of Hope in Philly. And he was starting this intentional community. Great. I'll come and check it out. He was a musician, and what ended up being put together by myself and these other people was a musical project that was on tour constantly. So it was 100% early church-based stuff.
Ideologies.
Sell all your stuff. We bought a school bus. It was like,
so wait,
it
hold
happened
on.
in the
I need
60s.
to back up. So you're hanging out and you're like, get a phone call from a friend, come up here and start this intentional community with me.
Mm-hmm.
You, at that point, liquidated your life?
Which was pretty simple because I was like a single person in an apartment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I put all my stuff in my Honda Passport.
Yeah.
And
drove up to Michigan.
And we had a bunch of yard sales. We had a house at that point.
Okay.
It was not a lot of people. It was a couple of people.
So
Probably
there's 3 or 4 of you.
6.
Okay. All living in this one house together.
Yep.
You're literally a founding member of what this is.
Well, kind of. The singer for the band had started this project as his college thesis.
Uh-huh.
And so there had been a couple different permutations of the same band before. But for this, traveling, full-time nomadic music project situation, yeah, I was there at the beginning of kind of putting that together.
Sounds fun.
So you joined this.
It was really fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All of us are musicians, so we know that feeling, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really fun. And I did that. People came and went. We brought on a number of younger members over the years that we were doing it. But we, after we bought the bus, we got rid of our house and we lived on it full time. So we converted a bus to burn vegetable oil, and we were on tour all the time.
Now, when
Fun to
you
do
were
in
on
your
tour,
20s.
Yeah,
Sounds fun
so
for a
cool.
minute.
yeah.
Fun to do in your 20s.
But when you were on tour, you got invited to be a part of this intentional community, but the community was attached to Circle of Hope.
Yes.
So when you were invited to the intentional community, what you were really invited to was an arm of the Miracle of Hope Church.
Yeah. Circle of Hope
Or
was,
Circle of Hope,
we
sorry.
were like a,
I keep calling it Circle
think
of Mercy, Miracle of Miracle of Mercy, Miracle of I keep getting the name wrong. Circle of Hope.
yes, we were a mission team.
Did you know that that's what was going to be going on when you
I had
originally
never been
signed
to
up?
Circle
Oh,
when I signed up.
you
to
had never
go.
been.
Nope.
It
I
was
was
kind of
friends.
based on
I knew people there, but I had never been there.
the strength of the relationships you had were
yeah.
what drew you into this experience.
hmm
So when you started going on tour, were you always repping Circle of Hope?
A bit, but we were also like out on the road, so we were kind of in the wind a little bit.
Yeah.
I think after some time, the church kind of said, like, we need to find a way to like plug you into the community more so that you're not so isolated, which I think was helpful. Some of the people in the group were really young when they started playing with us. So there was, 18 and 19-year-olds that were, I mean, really, I was always the oldest woman.
Mm-hmm.
And at times there were up to 12 of us living together that
In
way.
a bus.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
That to me sounds like a nightmare. I would rather die than
it was
live
both.
on a bus
It was
with
both
12,
things.
19-year-olds.
Some of it was
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
and some of it was absolutely the worst things that ever happened to me.
When you guys were out and about on your bus, one of the things that was discussed in the previous episode and that we talked about was kind of a hallmark of Keith Green's ministry. And that for me, growing up in purity culture, especially being a musician and affiliated with a large megachurch, there was a high premium placed on how I behaved outside of the church. And so there was a lot of control around my body, purity culture, drinking, smoking, sex, watching R-rated movies, any and all of that. There was a high premium placed on continuing to practice like Bible studies and all this other stuff we had, if we were away from the church, doing anything away from the church. So was that sort of like, what was the culture of your first century Christianity tour bus?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult because we were all super young. I mean, I think we definitely had like many like Fleetwood Mac moments.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
yeah. Uh-huh.
I feel like there was a lot of conflict. I think there was a lot of misogyny.
Mm.
I think that, I was in a relationship the entire time that I was on the bus. That was definitely like a known entity that was never discussed.
Mm.
That like we weren't supposed to like have people know that we like share a bunk. That kind of thing.
So if there was
And so everyone else was having relationship. I mean, we were 20 and 25-year-old people,
but pretending that you're not having it,
or just like this isn't to be discussed with anybody. It's like not their business.
Uh-huh.
So you're like everybody knows, nobody talks.
But that also means that like if there's a problem, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So if your partner of like
if
many
there's a
years
problem, it's
is
your
like
problem.
not, if you're being treated poorly,
That's another thing you don't talk about.
oh well,
Right.
Yeah. You're kind of trapped.
Interesting.
Yeah. So without going like too deep on individuals, I think eventually that project, we were on tour probably paying 200 shows a year for 3 or 4 years. And then we
intense.
Flamed out. Of course we did.
But all of that money was going back to Circle of Hope, or was it going back to you guys?
I think that some of the money probably went back to Circle of Hope. I think we were a nonprofit under the church, and all of the music was open source and copyright free, and we took donations for everything that we did. So, and we were driving around, so we
it was
supported
costing
ourselves.
money. Yeah.
Now, I do think that some people supported themselves more than others because, again, this is unpaid labor. I didn't collect a check. It was a common purse, so that if you're not in the know of intentional communities, that means everybody dump your money in the plate and you get what you get.
Yeah.
You know?
You get what you need.
Were you okay with that? Or did it change after a while when you started thinking other people were getting a little bit more out of the plate?
I was okay with it at the time, but I think when it came to the point of saying, everyone kind of said, I don't believe that I would like to get off this bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I was 30 when I stopped that, maybe 31.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a same Honda Passport.
Yeah.
I was given money to get a new set of tires because we had been using that car for our
Ministry.
auxiliary driving for the entire time. And I got like a down payment on an apartment.
Yeah. But that's all you had to show for that many years of working and touring as a subsidiary of this larger ministry that had multiple congregations and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you see any major impact on what you guys were doing, like with the public that you were engaged with?
Yes, I think
like
so.
Like positive things?
I mean, the band was very political, and I think that the ideas that were there were good in a lot of ways. I think for the personal impact on people in the community, I think I was going to say were largely negative, but that's not really true. I think there were a lot of negative impacts for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So what was a standard? So you would show up, were your shows outside, were your shows in public spaces, were your shows at churches?
Everywhere that you can think of.
Anywhere you can think of.
Mega church.
So you would
like
put on
gigantic festivals.
a show.
People's living
What was
room.
the central crux of your engagement with your audience?
So this gets pretty specific. So we the idea behind the musical project was to be a voice for the voiceless refugee, and the analogy of Christ being a refugee and talking about those kinds of issues in the music. So it was this very like ecstatic worship kind of situation, but it was very
Pentecostal roots
and very heavy.
Yeah. Oh.
Very heavy.
Yeah, like heavy metal.
No, well, yes, that, but also just like, we're talking about like Iraqis being bombed every day.
Yeah.
We're talking about, we're basically talking about like the suffering of Christ all day, every day, and not talking
you guys
about
literally are the Christian Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
got it.
That.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Heavy.
But never talking about like the redemptive qualities or like the uplifting or the salvic nature.
I think some of the idea, and this is where I
Yeah.
think it gets sticky, is that the idea that maybe isn't being said, or maybe it is being said, is that your salvation comes from like identifying with this like
suffering,
deep suffering.
Right.
And you save yourself by feeling that, feeling the suffering.
The nature
of
of your shittiness and the
Yeah,
suffering
kind
that you
of.
caused Christ to feel.
A bit.
You're a piece of shit.
a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, which honestly, I hate the way that sounds, but that's the fundamental message of most Christianity. You were born a piece of shit.
You're garbage.
Your piece of shitness is what caused this massive amount of suffering. So you need to be really super sorry that your innate piece of shitness caused this massive amount of suffering.
And if you're not sorry
and
enough, you're going to
grovel
burn up.
and crawl on the floor for the rest of your life, making sure that everybody else knows their piece of shitness caused this problem.
Yeah.
And there's no actual like these larger denominations, these big mega churches, these ministries. This is a common theme in the ministry I grew up in. It's a common theme in the ministry you're talking about. It's a common theme in that Keith Green's ministries. You need to keep your humiliation at the forefront of your mind so that you are constantly walking in a state of almost near anxiety and fear. because that's the only way you're going to be a proper vessel for the message of salvation and hope.
Dude, it's a motivation.
That is Jesus Christ.
It's a motivation. I get it.
It's
But
motivation and it's something you can do.
It's why I had an ulcer
can.
as a senior in high school. You cannot inundate a body, a physical human body with bones and blood and a heart and a stomach in that level of anxiety and trauma and shame and humiliation for years on end and not expect it to have a physical impact on that body.
Yeah.
And Jesus Christ came that I might have life more abundantly, not live in constant fear and suffering and shame that I'm A, not doing enough, B, not recognizing and espousing my own piece of shitness enough, and B, not encouraging other people to do the same. Mm-hmm. That's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad because
is.
it's not really that was never the intention of first century Christianity.
Maybe
all the
it
way
was.
back to. Maybe it was.
I don't know.
Well, but the thing is, if you look,
Yeah.
all of this is based on our understanding of the Bible.
Right.
And what you just described as you are a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And this is the only way to fix it. I mean, people can easily find that in the Bible if they look for it.
That's
it's there.
absolutely true.
It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
so
sure.
this was promoted all the way from the Old
Yeah.
Testament into the New Testament. It continues on
Yeah.
until the end of it.
Mhm.
And then it's just been promoted for centuries and centuries, and it's
Yeah.
tradition, and it's what we do.
Yeah.
But is there a different message? Is there a different message? We got to get to the bottom of that someday.
Yeah.
Because these cultures keep developing like this. In our own country, we have these small little cult-like things.
We keep having these cultures
Yes.
develop out of this particular message.
Yeah, so we got to get out of it. But that's not the time for it. Let's hear more of this.
I want
story
to.
of
Yeah,
Heather.
this story. So you did this for X amount of years. You finally, the church Circle of Hope is who decided to park the bus.
No, the band decided that we weren't going to do it
Okay.
anymore. So we parked the bus and eventually everybody kind of had a meeting and said, like, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I chose to go to Philadelphia. I chose to go to Circle of Hope. That was really, I could have gone home to live with my parents, who were, by the way, supportive the entire time because they're wonderful, incredible
Your mom
people.
has written me
I know.
an email telling me how much she loves the show.
She keeps
Aw.
meaning to sign up for your Patreon, and I don't know if she has
so
or not, but
lovely.
she really they're
She's lovely.
fantastic and very I would say very godly people and are very, Anyway, I could have gone home to my parents, but also again, I was 30.
Yeah.
I was not trying to do that. So I did go to Philadelphia and I did kind of embed myself in Circle of Hope and try to like get my life back together.
And this was circa 2003.
that was 2007.
2007. Okay.
7, 8, I think. Anyway,
Yeah.
So I stopped playing with the band. The band kept doing some things. Sometimes they weren't on tour full time. They started doing some other things. Eventually, I was asked to not because I was a divisive person. Because
Am I
I
allowed
was
to ask
not.
the name of this band? Like, does this band have a name, or is it going to cause a problem?
It's like not even worth talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll-
Go ahead.
I'll tell you on a break.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll be great. I'm just very curious if I know this, if I've heard this.
Maybe not. I mean, it was like a very anyway.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You said you're trying to get your life back together.
I'm getting my life back together.
The band has asked you not to participate.
The
in these
band
little
has asked me not to
side quests
participate
that they're now
in-
involved in.
Their future endeavors.
You've been
Very
kindly
Fleetwood
invited to
Mac.
not
Which
return.
was a very, which
You've been
without going
cordially
deep
invited
is
to
a
not
Fleetwood
return.
Mac.
They
That's
finally-
exactly,
they got
that's
rid of
exactly
Stevie
what
Nicks.
happened. Not that I was the Stevie Nicks, because I was also like I was. This is a 12-person band.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was not important, and I was not like a figurehead of this group either.
Yeah.
So it was not important for me to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I don't know. I struggled around for a couple of years. I was like somebody's personal assistant. I worked at a sweatshop. I making boar bristle brushes to wash cars with for
Wow.
7 cents a bristle. It was terrible. I only did that very briefly, but I got a job doing social work, working with homeless ladies. I was in a small group. They called themselves. I did that. I was in the church. We met every week. We had all group dinners, potlucks all the time. Everyone that you know is in the church. Everyone that you know from the church is in the neighborhood. We all live within a mile of each other. We watch each other's children. We're whatever. So
It sounds like it had a really loving, supportive community element to it.
I think it did. I mean, there's some of they continue to be some of my best friends of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the expectation is you're same as a common purse. You're all in. Like, if you're not doing this, then what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So not just like if you're living your life in this community, if you are not living your life as a part of the Circle of Hope community, what are you doing with your life?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
once again, it's like the message of the original first century message of living together and being as one is being co-opted to living as Circle of Hope and living as one as Circle
Which
of
is
Hope.
bananas, because all of these people had their own domiciles, or they owned them, or they rented them.
Yeah.
They all didn't live in the same, in the first
there
century.
was a lot of like co-living in the community, but like,
there was?
Yeah.
Okay.
In our community.
Yeah.
But I think
was there like a group? How did you guys keep a track of it though? Like, was there some sort of like group ethic or group policing that kept everybody inside?
Kind of.
Oh, wow.
I mean, not. We had small groups, and you had a cell leader and a cell leader apprentice, and you're supposed to grow your cell. And when the cell gets to a certain size, then it multiplies. And if it doesn't get to that size or it dwindles, then it dies. And you stop meeting.
That was a real
Same
common
with the
church model in the late 90s.
Very common.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Late 90s,
it's a
early
very
2000s.
corporate model.
Yes.
It's
huge way of running churches.
In your cell,
Bible
you
studies.
might have people saying like, why are you dating that guy? What is that?
Yeah.
But social control, I think, is not as blatant as it sounds
kind of
on
that
its face.
self-policing thing.
Yeah. It's the expectations, and it's the expectation of everyone in the community.
Yeah.
So, like, are you allowed to get divorced? Probably. Is everybody going to have an opinion about it? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
So what ended up leading you down a path of exiting the Circle of Hope community, because you don't affiliate yourself with that congregation now?
There were a number of things. I do think the journalist that wrote this book touched on some of them. I think that there was some, again, inadvertent misogyny, I think, going on. I think that women's voices were not held in as high regard as people would wanted them to be. It just, patriarchy is so ingrained in people that it's like really hard to be quiet and like hear what a woman has to say. Anyway, that was one thing. There was a lot of issues around being an affirming church that were really hard to deal with. I didn't mention it, but Circle of Hope is actually an Anabaptist church, and they were under the Brethren in Christ denomination.
Okay.
I think in the book it talks about later. I did not realize this at the time, but the Brethren in Christ owned our building.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge motivator to not go against their
ideology
around some specific things. I think
Yeah.
Same-sex relationships was one of those things.
So the church was afraid to make a break with its larger denominational standard practice because that large denomination actually owned their building. Josh Sexton had that. Remember when he did his testimony series talking about some of that same stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. The year before I left Philadelphia at Lent, we were talking about this in the car.
Yeah.
I made an agreement with myself for Lent, and it's going to sound petty or odd, but I said, I'm going to give up this church for Lent and see what happens. I'm going to see if I it cease to exist. Do I just evaporate into the air if I'm not if I'm not doing this? And I didn't make a big announcement. You don't need to announce your exit to the room, right? But if I don't go, am I okay?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of the issue with these communities and these high control religions. It's this idea that's very subconsciously perpetrated, is that you are a part of something powerful and special and real and unique. And that being a part of that then makes you powerful and special and real and unique.
Yes.
And that if you are no longer a part of the thing that is powerful and special and real and unique, then you also cease to be those things.
Yes.
And you will no longer feel alive.
But it also can be true. I mean, Andy and I have talked about this many times. Like, sometimes there is a pivotal person in a group that when that person leaves, the whole group dissipates.
Sure, yeah.
Like that happens, So you could have been a very important person in a specific cell or a group, and it could have disintegrated. I don't know.
Sure.
I'm really interested to see what happened.
I decided that I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of feel like this is like a bit of a branch, but the community did have kind of a unspoken way of shunning people. And I think that
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah,
Yep.
that
I was waiting
definitely
to hear
happened.
about the shunning.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got shunned out of a particular situation, and they actually didn't even want me to discuss it. One of the things that the most infuriating personal experience that I had there was with the what do they call it? Circle of confinement or circle of containment. That was basically this thing happened with you. You were wronged or you feel like you were wronged in some way. We're going to deal with it. You don't talk about it to anyone.
That happened to me
Stop talking
that
about
happened
it.
to me when my high school volleyball coach, I was going to a private Christian school, part of a mega church. The high school volleyball coach who had access to all of our children put his fingers in my mouth and then kissed me, but I wasn't allowed to talk about that. The church was going to handle that on their own. Circle of containment.
You know why? They're using a biblical verse for this.
Yeah.
They are, because this is what it's brought up in the Bible, that you don't take it to the authorities. You settle it in the church.
Yeah, well, if I go
Catholic
to a
Church has
church
done
and
it.
there's
And
a
when you-
child
and
that's
when
going to
you
be
go
abused
to
by an
them-
adult,
I'm with you. I'm not saying it's right. I'm with
Yeah.
you,
This is
okay?
this
Yeah.
is them being like, we're not worried about the Romans here.
Yeah.
But that's a specific cultural time and place
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they have a seriously antagonistic relationship with the government.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
in that exact context, I think it makes a little more sense. But like
In
many things,
in the first century context,
Listen to
because
the
they had such
atheist.
an antagonistic
Right. He's calling
relationship
it
with
out
the Roman
exact-
government. Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
he's calling
Yeah,
it out
yeah.
exactly what it is. The circle of containment and the way that they're using the Bible is an abuse of the Bible.
Yeah.
It's incorrect.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's a victim of it.
That's
period.
awful.
The
Yeah.
end. Andy, you're right. I wish people in church would listen to this guy.
Everybody needs to have a good old-fashioned atheist on the board.
You should always have an atheist on the
You
board. of
really
your
Dude,
should.
it's
church.
one of the greatest things we ever did in our podcast.
I volunteer as tribute.
Oh, man. You're more than welcome to be on anytime.
But anyhow, so you had this experience. The church decided to contain it, i.e.
Church
keep
decided
you
to
quiet.
contain it. I continued to kind of be around for a while, and then I said, this.
Yeah.
All right.
No thanks.
Yeah.
And
Contain this, sucker.
Yeah. Right.
and I continued to be friends with the people that I was friends with, and
Yeah.
I continued to actually work for the nonprofit thrift store that the church ran until I moved away and married my atheist husband in North Carolina. And most of those people did not. A lot of the friends came to our wedding, and I keep up with, but I don't think that the pastor of my congregation has talked to me once because it is like you don't exist.
Yeah. If you're not for us, you're against us. There's no neutrality.
And
In
if you
these
move
big
out of the zip
ministries.
code,
Yeah.
if you're not in the community,
Then you don't exist.
you don't exist.
I can't get
Yeah.
into it, but I got into the science behind this, like the actual science.
Mhm.
There are neural pathways that get
Yes.
formed in ministers' brains. Dude,
Yeah.
this is why they
Ooh.
don't engage. Dude, it's so awesome.
That's
It's in my study.
interesting.
You'll actually hear some
I
of
think
it
it's
today.
very interesting.
And that's kind of where you are now.
Yeah, I came here and I married a man who probably would identify as an atheist, and he always said, if you want to go to a church, go to a church. And I always said, I don't need to. And our experiences over the 10 years we were married, and then the years since we talked about it in a previous podcast, he passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Kind of moved me in a direction of like, I would probably consider myself an atheist today. People's thoughts are fluid, but that's where I am.
So it's not necessarily just from the experiences that you had younger. It's just the way you've developed over time. You kind of came to this on your own, in your own conclusions.
Well, and I feel like, Andy, we should have a longer, not off-air conversation about it, because I think it is also just a very human progression to go toward religion, and I think it can be
there's something about it that seems innate, or not specifically religion, but a religion like anything seems sort of innate.
Yeah.
And probably important, especially now, right? There's a way in which it's becoming more important because of the way our lives are being individuated.
Yes.
And we are acting as if we are solo actors, right? And all that. I don't know. That's a whole other subject. But
people are desperate to belong to a thing.
Yeah, always have been. That's not new, but we're being separated kind of by the system we live in.
Yes.
More and more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our friends are becoming AI, as it were. Not literally, but you know what I mean.
But,
like,
that's through social media apps and things like that, the FaceTime that we're all familiar with, sitting around the campfire, protecting one another from wolves and, marauders, has given way to like chit-chatting with one another, lying in our beds, eating popcorn, Yeah, separated by 1,000 miles and an Ethernet cable, So I want to thank you, Heather, for sitting down with us and for sharing that entire story. And thanks all of you for listening in, because I just wanted to create a backdrop for what we're all experiencing here, because this whole episode with the Last Days Ministry has, helped me. And of course, it's sent Rick on this whole other amazing dogleg journey that is available on the Burroughs of Berea Patreon page, where Rick is doing a deep dive onto several different cults. But it's propelled me to kind of take a look at some of these larger Christian organizations, but also how even just like basic grassroots Christianity can sort of feed into these problematic community-based ministries. So I wanted to set a base for that, because we're going to come back in a couple of weeks and we're going to have this discussion again. We're going to continue talking about it, but more from a theoretical and what do we do now sort of standpoint. So Heather, thanks again for sharing your story with us.
Yeah,
that's an interesting.
What a joy!
I know.
That is an interesting.
And I got news. Listen, to the audience, I'm going to find out the name of that band, and you're not going to know it. So suck on that.
You aren't going to know. Yeah,
it's the best part.
Thanks, Andy.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Absolutely,
guys. Take it easy, and we'll see you next time on Notes from the Other Side.
Peace out.
Folks, if you're enjoying this episode, you might really enjoy some of the benefits that come with being a Patreon subscriber. Over at patreon.com, we have different levels of membership, and starting for as low as $2 a month, you'll get access to things like all of the notes that I use to make these episodes, bits of script that didn't make it into the show, and even bibliographies about the books that I read to get where I'm going. Through Patreon, you even have access to some of the video that we take for the show. So some of those interviews that you like so well, you'll get to watch them in real time. So once again, head over to patreon.com/NFTOS, as in Notes from the Other Side. That's patreon.com/NFTOS for more information about becoming a Patreon subscriber to this show. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.